Hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy Utley. I am an adjunct professor at the Standford Institute for Design, or the D School, as it's often referred to. We teach human-centered design methods to graduate students and undergraduates, as well as professionals all around the world. And in my work, I do three things primarily. One, I run professional development programs. So I teach folks who aren't students at Standford, but who are in mid-career or executive level and looking to develop a better practice around innovation. Two, I lead the leadership lab. So all of the teams that are learning how, or all the students who are learning how to lead creative teams. And then third, I lead the accelerator program called Launch. We launch about 15 new businesses per year. So those three things are the three things that I primarily work on. But when I heard from Juan and Inez about this effort, the AscendingMind conference, I wanted to take a little bit of a step away from my D school life and all the things I think about there as far as design thinking is concerned, and actually share with you some thoughts about a little bit broader topic or more fundamental topic. I'm going to share my screen here with you all, so hopefully you can see it. But what I want to talk about today is this notion of inspiration as a discipline. Can everybody see? Is that, yeah, hopefully? Thumbs up? I hope so. So what I want to talk about briefly today is this notion that inspiration is a discipline. One of the things that I've been thinking about, I don't really know what word to put on it, but it's something to do with imagination. How do I trigger imagination, not only in my students, but also in myself as a creative professional and practitioner? How do I stimulate invention? How do I convey a sense of wonder, curiosity, awe? These are all concepts that have been on my mind recently, because what I've noticed is when the methods that I teach at Standford do their best are when they trigger these underlying realities: curiosity, imagination, wonder. And as I have, and I would say, and when my tools and the methods that I teach at Standford don't work out well, it's when they fail to stimulate that thing that's underneath, that curiosity, that wonder, that imagination. And so really, as a design practitioner and as an instructor and teacher and advisor, my question a lot of times is not just how do I teach design practice, but how do I stimulate imagination? How do I stimulate wonder, curiosity, invention, etc., right? Awe. How do I stimulate those things? And for me, one of the things that I've been kind of grappling with is this reality that the only way to stimulate imagination is to connect with unexpected inputs. And there's something about the way that we're structuring our lives where we don't routinely encounter unexpected inputs. You know, algorithms and social media, we curate our lists most often to only get what we expect and to only get what we already agree with. And there's not really unexpected surprises that encounter us. But the thing is, if we want to trigger imagination, if we think imagination is worth developing, we need to be opening up ourselves to unexpected inputs. You think about Johannes Kepler, who defined many of the laws of planetary motion, right? In his day, the operative paradigm was that the skies above were firmament, or an actual substance. And one day he saw a shooting star fly across the sky, and he thought, why isn't the firmament shattering? Right? And it was that unexpected input of actually watching a shooting star. When the unexpected input met with his existing paradigm, it led him to imagine new possibilities. What if it's not actually a substance up there, right? So the question for me is, how do we stimulate our interaction with unexpected inputs? If we believe that unexpected inputs are critical to imagination, how do we increase our exposure to unexpected inputs? And I'm inspired by Linus Pauling. He's the only individual to win the Nobel Prize twice as an individual. He said to get a good idea, you need lots of ideas. All of us are after ideas. Ideas. The world is full of people who want to find ideas. But what I really like about what Pauling has said is not many people are thinking about volume. When I think about an idea, I think about quality, not quantity. However, the research is clear that if you want to get to good ideas, the best way to get to good ideas is to generate lots of ideas. This is a clever quote, but the research is also clear. Quantity is the primary driver of quality. And so, if I think about the challenge not being getting good ideas, but getting a lot of ideas, again, this question of how do I come up with new ideas? How do I stimulate my imagination and a sense of wonder and curiosity and awe, etc.? And for me, there's a word that has really been useful, which is this word inspiration. I mentioned it at the beginning of my talk. Inspiration is critical. And for some people, that word inspiration triggers, posters on corporate hallways from the 1980s, which have words like teamwork, and things like that. But that's not what I mean. What I mean is being deliberate about exposing myself to new areas of inquiry. So my wife, for example, is a fashion designer by training. And when she goes to Paris, it's not because she likes macarons, even though she does. It's because fashion designers go to Paris to get exposed to new textiles and styles. They go to New York to see how people in different environments are wearing clothes, what garments are becoming more trendy, etc. I talk to artists, creators, musicians, designers. Inspiration is something that they are relentless about attending to, because they know what? If I want to get a good idea, I need a lot of stimulation. And inspiration is what I mean. It's stimulation of one's imagination. I was teaching a class with a Grammy award-winning hip hop artist named Lecrae. And we were teaching our class last fall. We were teaching some students about some simple tools to go get inspiration. And I said, Lecrae, do you have anything you want to say to the students about how you think about inspiration? And he said this. He said, inspiration is a discipline. And to me, that really stood in stark contrast with how I think many people think about their own practice. Inspiration is on the radar of creative professionals, musicians, designers, artists. They are relentless about inspiration. But the majority of professionals aren't nearly as attentive to their inspiration. And so for me, this is a paradigm or a worldview that I think is really important in this age of imagination, and especially in this age of trying to do new things. We think a lot about output. And what I would suggest is what we need to be attending to is input. And inspiration is the input into the innovation funnel, so to speak. One of the important distinctions that I feel needs to be made is when it comes to good ideas, we shouldn't be thinking about it like we think about going to the grocery store. We think, oh, I need a head of lettuce, or I need some kale, or something like that. I go to the market or I go to the store and I pick one up. And a lot of times when people say I want ideas, what they want is they want to go to the grocery. They want to go to the idea store and look at the shelves and look at and say, oh, let's grab that one. That's the one I want. And what I would say is that's the wrong way to think about ideas. We should be thinking about it in more of a gardening metaphor. I have to cultivate. There's an attention and a discipline that's rigorous and regular. I've got to weed, I've got to water, I've got to get sunlight. I need to be thinking about input. The grocery store is about fast access to output. Gardening is about being focused on the process and input. If you think about it, that's a big paradigm shift, but if you think about a lot of the really important things in our lives, we don't have a grocery store mentality. You think about your spiritual practice. It's probably more like gardening than it is like the grocery store. You think about your hygiene practices. Do you ever find yourself saying, I took a shower last week, I'm good. I would say, oh, I picked up a shower earlier. No, I want to shower every day. I put on deodorant every day, right? You think about our health. Is it sufficient for our health to have eaten well last month? Do we ever say, oh yeah, I exercise a lot. I went on a run in 2018. No, we don't think about it in that transactional way. It's something we have to preserve and maintain. Think about any craft you engage. If you're becoming a painter, or if you're learning how to do woodworking, or you're learning how to work with chromotypes, or many things, there's this discipline that attends to it. And even our work, we don't think about our work like going to the grocery store. A lot of our work requires careful cultivation. The point I'm making is, in many parts of our lives, there's this sense of practice. And yet, when it comes to ideation, when it comes to seeking fresh inputs, practice isn't something that most people are considering. And what I would like to advocate for is a more disciplined approach to seeking fresh input. I want to share 3 quick practices that I believe are very useful and very simple, but can be incredibly powerful as it pertains to stimulating input. The first practice is combining perspectives. There's a lot of research that indicates homogeneous teams don't think of ideas nearly as easily or quickly as heterogeneous teams. What does that mean? When I'm trying to think of something new, I should wonder, who else could I talk to who has a different perspective than I do? There's loads of stories. My colleague and partner, Perry Claiborne, tells a great story about how bringing a textile designer along on a trip with in his executive leadership role at Patagonia inspired a completely different kind of product that they never would have thought of if they hadn't brought somebody who historically was involved in the development process way, way later. We try to provoke people at the D School to be thoughtful about several different dimensions of personality in order to be thoughtful about the kinds of collaborators that they seek. The second practice, besides combining perspectives, is this notion of reversing polarity. It's almost, for a moment, entertain the prospect of doing the opposite of what you're trying to do. If you think about ideas or ideation as a function of new combinations or unexpected combinations, sometimes when you're pushing in one direction, just turning and pushing in the other direction is a great way to trigger new thinking. So you might brainstorm the opposite. If you say, we're trying to make this experience this way, just for a moment, entertain the idea of thinking about the experience completely opposite. Oftentimes it's just that easing the effort or the force in one direction frees up new connections. You can also borrow a page out of the playbook of Aerosmith. So the 80s hair metal band, Aerosmith, they had a weekly ritual where they said every member of the band had to bring something that they thought they were pretty sure was terrible. They called it their Dare to Suck meeting. And every week they had one meeting where everyone had to bring something they thought was terrible. And Steven Tyler, the lead singer, he has a great quote. He said, 9 times out of 10, it is terrible. But 1 time out of 10, you get Dude Looks Like a Lady, which is a really big hit for them. Which is to say, sometimes lowering the bar on what output are we looking for is a really great way, which similarly, making the worst version. Instead of trying to make something really great, try to make it terrible. A lot of times making something terrible helps you discover things that you could do to make it great that you hadn't been thinking of. And then the last practice, so I've mentioned combining perspectives. I've mentioned reversing polarity. The last practice that I want to mention is embracing distractions. A lot of times we think if I'm trying to get to ideas, I need to focus more. And what we'd say is, certainly there's a time and a place for focus, but there's also a time and a place for distraction. And there's a lot of research that indicates sometimes it's the disinhibited mind that actually allows for new idea generation. So taking a walk, for example, I realize that for the next 3 days, you actually can't leave your residence. So don't take a walk right now. Definitely don't break the law. But generally speaking, there's a reason why many people have their best ideas on their commute or in the shower or in other places. Why? Because it's the time they aren't directly thinking about the thing they're trying to do. And all of a sudden, ideas come. And there's a cognitive notion of what's called disinhibition. And a lot of times when we're focusing, we don't let in any extraneous information. And when we're disinhibited, or when we're not focusing, we let in unnecessary information. And sometimes unnecessary information is what provokes a new idea. But, well, there's a great quote here. The father of behavioral psychology, Amos Tversky, who worked together with Danny Kahneman for, decades, when he was asked about how they came up with so many interesting experiments, this is what he said: you waste years by not being able to waste hours. And he credits a lot of his and Kahneman's breakthroughs in the field of economics and psychology with the notion they would go on walks together. And as they went on walks together, they would kind of wonder, and they would see things, and they would joke, and it would help them frame their research in ways they hadn't thought about before. And the last kind of sub-practice within this idea of embracing distractions is deliberately leave work unfinished, or procrastinate. Procrastinating is actually a really great way to generate volume and to spark imagination. The reason is because, and Adam Grant has talked about this at length in his TED Talk and in his book Originals, which is an exceptional book. But he's talked about there's research, Russian psychologists did some research that basically showed if you finish a task, your mind no longer thinks about it. But an unfinished task, your brain continues to try to solve even in the background. So if you deliberately leave some work unfinished, you actually increase your receptivity to new inputs. And it's a great practice. And I find it's actually critical. If you're going to embrace distractions, make sure that you've got a problem in mind. If you leave all your work behind and you don't think anything about it, you probably won't run into unexpected inputs. But if there's a nagging problem or challenge or creative endeavor that you're considering, leaving it in the back of your mind, all of a sudden it's the difference between, there's no receptors here. No new ideas can germinate because nothing can be conceived, right? But if I have an unfinished problem, all of a sudden there can be a conception of a new idea because these unexpected inputs have a place to be received. So I've just tried to describe these three simple practices. There are many more that are pioneered, as I mentioned, by designers and creatives and artists and others who are more disciplined about seeking inspiration. But from where I sit, the reason for a lack of really great ideas being implemented is actually because so few people are attending to their practices of seeking input. And what I would hope to impart to you in this short talk is the notion that if you attend to the practice of seeking inspiration and the discipline and treat it just like any other discipline in your life, whether it's spirituality or health or hygiene or work, you'll be way more likely to increase your creative output at the end. Don't treat it like a grocery store run. Treat it like a garden that has to be cultivated and developed over time. I think that's all for my time today. I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your conference, and I appreciate the opportunity to get to share with you.